Hello everyone and welcome back to Sightless Fun, a podcast about board game accessibility for people who are blind and visually impaired. I'm your host, Ertay, and today I have the pleasure to talk to Temple Smith, a blind dungeon master. Welcome to the show, Temple. It's great to have you here.
It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So today, with Temple, we're going to talk about the visual accessibility of Dungeons & Dragons. He's going to tell us about how he plays the game, how he uses character sheets, how he deals with dice, and much more. But before we get to that, Temple, why don't you tell us a bit about your background?
I'm a 54-year-old American living in Oklahoma in the United States. I became blind in 2009 from late onset type 1 diabetes. And for the last 10 years or so, I've been playing games and hanging out since my health has deteriorated and I can't hold a job for that reason. And I concentrate on keeping myself entertained and helping others.
So before 2009, you didn't start playing Dungeons & Dragons after you went blind, correct? It was,
right.
Do you remember when you first started?
Yeah, I started in 1980.
Yeah, and back then you could perfectly see.
I could see fine. I was a teenager in high school and got invited to a game at lunch in the school library. And I haven't stopped playing since then.
No, that's great. And do you remember when you started DMing? So that's the shorthand version of dungeon mastering.
Right, the one who helps tell the story and keep things organized. It was shortly after that, simply because dungeon masters are hard to find. It's a lot of work. And you don't get the fun of playing the character. You play all the non-player characters that are in the story, but you don't get to focus on one. So most people don't choose to DM. So I was the one that was willing to step forward and do it in my group.
Yeah, I bet it's a lot of work. I'm in an online group we're not playing Dungeons & Dragons, we're playing the Dungeon Master's own custom role-playing game, and right. I bet it's a lot of work. And we're going to talk about this a bit later. How often do you play now? And do you DM for one particular group, or do you have multiple groups that you run?
I play twice a week now. I DM for two different groups. One that is my nephew and niece. I'm teaching them how to play.
Yeah.
And they're 12 and 10. So that's a lot of fun. And then that's on a Saturday, and then on a Sunday I run a campaign for my friends from high school, the same guys that I started playing D&D with way back when. Oh,
that's great. It's great that you still keep in touch with them. I also reconnected with my high school friends thanks to board games. So yeah, that sounds awesome. Could you describe your process of preparing before a session?
Back when I started, it's changed over the years. Back when I first started, it was in depth, and I was basically planning out a novel every session, to put the players through. And especially since I've lost my sight, and as I've advanced as a DM, I put a lot less physical prep work into it and more mental. I figure out exactly what they're going to encounter, what situation they're going to have to overcome, whether it's fighting something or figuring out a puzzle or a trap or something. And then other than that, I improv the situation going into it. I create NPCs ahead of time, non-player characters for them to encounter. But by and large, I improv as much of it as I can. I find that tells a better story than the stuff that I plan out ahead of time.
Yeah, and you also need to take into account if people react to something the way you didn't anticipate. And
right. Well, improv is always a part of it. Even when you do all the the complete planning, I just work improv into the plan so that it's if you over plan for something in D&D, it's called railroading. It's where you build railroad tracks and you force your players to stay on that as they ride through and watch the story. I prefer not to do that. I just let them go wherever they want to do, and I improv the situation, and eventually they're going to run into whatever obstacle I've got planned for them.
Right. Have you ever had any players who would particularly want to be railroaded?
Yeah, there are some players that like a more structured environment. None that I'm playing with currently. Some people don't get the freedom that you get in Dungeons and Dragons. They crave rules and structure and stuff that's not really a part of the game. They're the people that ask how you win at Dungeons and Dragons.
So, after losing your sight, how has your process changed? Like, do you spend more time on a particular part during preparation?
Yeah, I spend a lot more time thinking everything through. I would sit down and it would take me a couple hours to plan a session before I lost my sight, and I planned on improving stuff. Now, because I have so much time on my hand, I will sit there and work things through in my mind and all the possible different situations that we could encounter and try and come up with clever answers to all the problems. And it's made me much more thoughtful about my game. It's improved my game.
Do you use any special tools like a smartphone during your play? Like, where do you take your notes? Do you write them down in a notebook? Can you still see and read, for instance, large print?
Yes, I have a cell phone that I use the camera on it so I can zoom in to see stuff. I haven't had to do that in a while. I've got a new pair of glasses that give me a slightly better amount of sight, so I've been able to see a little bit better here lately. But I use my laptop computer, which is what I use to Dungeon Master from. And I have a notebook that I keep track of the hit points of the monster, the health level of the creatures. And I have a Sharpie, and I write it very large on there so I can see it. And then I just make notes on there as I go to refer back to later.
Yeah, and do you have are you running any high contrast settings on your laptop? Or do you use a text-to-speech engine, like a screen reader?
No, I've got enough sight with it, and my laptop's got a 17-inch monitor, so I can kind of lean into it. And with high contrast settings, and I use D&D Beyond, which is the program by Wizards of the Coast to run their game in a browser-based system. It lets me have all the monster data. It gives me a searchable database for all the magic and items and things.
Right. I've also read that D&D Beyond is also accessible with screen readers.
Yes, it is. And they're making it more so. It's kind of clunky right now, but they're working to make it much more accessible. Yeah,
that's good to hear. And there's plenty of blind players out there that I have seen on Twitter and stuff. Looks like much more so than blind board gamers that I've met since I started this.
Well, D&D is a game of imagination. You don't have to have physical things to play it. All you have to do is be able to come up with dice rolls, and you can do that with a phone app.
Yeah.
With voice control. So it's much more a game of thought and just your own imagination, and anyone can do that no matter how well they see.
Since you mentioned dice rolls, do you use your phone to handle dice rolls?
No, I'm too superstitious about dice. I have all these traditions with rolling dice from 40 years of gaming.
Yeah.
And I have double-sized D&D dice. They're twice as big as the normal ones. And they're high contrast. They're black with white numbers. And if I lean into them, I can see them well enough to read what's rolled on them.
Do you use any desk lamps on your table somewhere where you play, or do you just adjust the room lighting so you can see better?
Just adjust the room lighting. More light. My eye is light sensitive. I only have one eye, and it's fairly light sensitive. So I needed dimmer light for me to be able to see well in it. Like my room right now is a cave. It's dark in here.
Yeah. And have you ever tried any dice rolling apps just to compare? I mean,
Yes.
Because there's systems like modifiers and something that adds to a dice roll.
Right. Yeah, I've tried several of them, and I was for a short amount of time I was working on with another person on making a dice rolling app specifically for blind players.
Mm-hmm.
But then I discovered that Siri on the iPhone or Alexa or any of those things will roll Dungeons and Dragons dice for you if you ask it to. And if you know, most players know what their modifiers are. You know, you memorize your character if you play it long enough. You know what those are.
Mm-hmm.
Just having the app to roll the dice is I have found is good enough. But if not, Blind Sparrow, it's a company that just came out with a new phone app for the blind to roll dice that you can totally voice control it and make it do whatever you need for the number of dice or modifiers.
Yeah. They specifically aimed the app for blind users. So the app is released on iPhones, and I think it also works on iPads, but it's iOS based, and
it's iOS, yes,
and it's fully compatible with VoiceOver. So yeah, I'll drop a link in the show notes to the app, so
thank you.
People can check it out.
Also, just to mention, for dice rolling, there's a group that I work with that have 3D printed Braille dice, and they are Dots RPG. You can find them on Twitter, and they are great people. They do a huge amount of work for the blind community, and I'm a big advocate for them.
Yeah, I think they also are working with Wizards of the Coast now.
Yes, they're working on Braille rule books.
Yeah, that's
for all the D&D books.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's really good.
They are great people.
Right.
Great allies to the blind community.
Oh yeah. How about character sheets? Like, one of my bigger problems when playing with my online group, so I don't have anything physical, everything's on the computer. We are using Google spreadsheets for the character sheets, and I'm having a bit of a difficulty with my screen reader with that. So how do you deal with character sheets?
Before D&D Beyond, because I had to deal with this, I was in a D&D campaign before that came out, and it was very limiting for me. What I finally ended up doing was making a character sheet in Word, in MS Word.
Mm-hmm.
And because I could see it better in high contrast, and a screen reader can read, a Word document without a problem.
Yes.
But I had to make my own. It just would not work otherwise. I couldn't, I tried different printed out sheets and using, those high contrast pens to write in the numbers. And I even tried enlarging the size of the sheet of paper, that the sheet was on. And nothing really worked well until I put it in Word and then just used it on my laptop from there. But now with D&D Beyond, I just use the program. That's one of the limiting factors that keeps me in D&D, is because really they're the only ones that have a very accessible digital product that you can use to play the game from. Yeah,
board games usually require plenty of sighted assistance when you're playing with a blind player in the group. And how is it with you? Like, do you require sighted assistance during DMing for a group?
Yes. Well, I go ahead and use, for a large part of it, I use what's called theater of the mind. It's where I describe what's going on, and we'll have a fight and we'll just do it talking about it with me describing what happens. But some battles that are bigger, I'll use a map that has a grid system and then miniatures that we place out on it to position everyone. And when I do that, I tell the players where everything's supposed to be at and everything, and then they position it all. And then I let them run where the minis are and everything from my description. Because I can see kind of blobs of it, but I can't identify individual minis or see, distances marked off on the... I had talked to somebody last month that came up with a real good idea for the grid system in D&D, was to use crafting puff paint that leaves a little tactile line that you can feel.
Yeah.
to mark the grid system off in that, and then you would be able to feel each little box on the grid to count distance and stuff. I haven't yet tried that, but it sounds like a workable solution.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. So basically make a fully tactile map.
Yeah. You just have to be careful not to knock over everything when you're
that's one of the problems. And
that's a big problem with board games and D&D as well.
Yeah, games that involve like maps and area control mechanics, they are a bit troubling. Yeah, you either need to memorize the map, or if you have something that resembles the real world. For instance, Pandemic. I'm not sure if you've heard about the game. Like that's the map of the world, and you have cities. So if you have seen an atlas before, a map of the world, it's easier like to visualize which city connects to where. But when you have something, let's say if you pick a planet from Star Wars, it's much more complicated to learn how things connect. And I recently picked up a game called Castles of Burgundy. So it arrived yesterday, and that one has different hex layouts that you need to fill with hex tiles. It's an abstract game, and I'm going to play this weekend, so I'll see how I handle hex maps. It will be the first game that involve hex maps. I bet it will require a lot of sighted assistance from my friend. So
I imagine. Good luck with that.
Yeah, thanks. Have you ever DM'd for other blind players?
No, I haven't. I haven't even played in a game with other blind players. I just started on Twitter back in 2015, I think it was. And just kind of fell into the D&D community on here, and then noticed that there were other blind players that were involved in the game and everything, and kind of just got involved in the community. But I don't even know other blind people that I see very often around here. I've got some that I've gone to like blind guy training classes and stuff with, but not people that I interact with daily.
Right. So when you're playing, do you have any like advice to dungeon masters that are sighted but are playing with blind players? Like, is there anything they should change during their descriptions, or just in general when describing things, something that would help blind players?
Well, the first and most important thing that a sighted DM can do for a blind player is to ask them what help they need. Not to assume that this is what's going to help them or this is what they think is best for them, is to ask them, because blindness, as you well know, is a spectrum, and everybody has a different kind just about, and that helps more than anything. And then after that, the only thing that I've really found that I've needed, since I've only been blind for 10 years and I have a little bit of vision left, is my orientation towards whatever's going on in the story. And I always ask everybody to use a clock face, where they visualize me standing, looking at 12 o'clock on the clock, and then tell me what's going on around me based on the clock face.
Yeah, that's a good tip, actually.
And then, you can give distances, it's at 1 o'clock, 15 feet away or whatever. From that, and then in my mind I can visualize that and I can work with it. But everything else, I mean, you describe a room, everybody has an image of what, they say it's a creepy old dirty room. Something pops into everybody's head, as long as they have had some sight and experience with it.
Right.
The most difficult part is trying to help describe stuff for blind people that have been blind since birth, because they don't have that frame of reference. And I still haven't come up with a very good solution to that. I've talked to several people that have been blind from birth about trying to help work with that and everything, and none of us have come up with a great answer yet, but we're still working on it.
I wonder if there are any blind DMs out there that have been born blind and would like to hear how their experience is, and also the players that they DM for, like basically to compare.
Yeah. I don't. I know of one person who was born, but he was born visually impaired, not totally blind. So he has some frame of reference. That no, other than that, I don't know of any that were born blind.
Is there a particular Dungeons and Dragons edition that is more accessible compared to the others? Like, is there a difference in accessibility between the different editions?
Yes, 5th edition, the current edition, is the only one that works on D&D Beyond. And all the previous editions, I think, are available on PDF, but it's not PDF that's been set up to be accessible from the start. So I'm sure, as you know, that's almost too frustrating to try and use something that's not set up ahead of time. D&D Beyond, though, with 5th edition is very accessible compared to the others. The stuff, all the information you need is not hidden away in a print book that, you just can't access. And the older print books especially would have images that the text would be printed over. So, and it makes it impossible to pick out the words, even with, blowing it up and changing the contrast. They're working on that too, by the way. I've complained and campaigned.
Yeah. We've pretty much talked about digital rulebooks for board games in the past 4 or 5 episodes. Like I mentioned that every episode. And like images are a big problem, especially with screen readers.
Yes. Well, and I understand they're trying to make it, as visually attractive to the buyer as they can. They just need to realize that it's, blocking off one whole portion of their customer base from actually using it.
Do you have any advice for blind people who are looking to start DMing?
DMing is very rewarding. You get to create worlds, and you get to be the person that engages the fun for all your friends. You get to entertain an entire table, and it's a very rewarding experience. Playing is a lot of fun and personally gratifying, but when you DM, you help bring joy to others, and that's the best thing there is. I would recommend for any DM, sighted or blind, to take a creative writing class to learn how to write a story. It makes you a much better storyteller as a DM, and being a DM makes you a much better writer. But as far as that, I would get D&D Beyond, use it. Don't feel compelled to run pre-generated adventures and stuff. Come up with your own. Even if you don't think it's that great, it's just like any other skill that you develop. You start off limited and not doing the best that you think you can, but eventually you become really good at it. And, homebrewed worlds are the best worlds, in my opinion. They have the most depth. It's mostly just having the courage to try and to do it. And, also join the Twitter role-playing community. Get on Twitter and locate people there. I steal ideas from other people all the time on there. We help each other out. It's a very nice community. It's not like what most people associate Twitter to be. They're very kind and caring people that'll help you.
Since you mentioned adventures, do you have any favorite published adventures?
I haven't used a published adventure since the 1980s. I started making my own stuff, and I've never gone back to doing that. I just prefer building my own worlds.
Yeah.
And, creating it myself. And it doesn't matter what genre we were playing back when I was sighted, science fiction or superhero or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's just more fun for me to build my own.
Right. Have you published something on the web for others, like some adventure that you've run for your friends and then written up about it?
No, they keep encouraging me to. I still have because since I do everything on the computer, I have it all there, but I would have to organize it, in a form that other people other than me would understand, because I tend to use shorthand, for what I do.
Right.
But I might sometime in the future, but I haven't as of yet.
Yeah, you probably should do that. I mean, if you've been focusing on writing your own stories and stuff, there must be good stories in there worth publishing.
Well, thank you. I hope so.
Before we wrap up, do you have any other final thoughts you would like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, especially for the sighted ones, go out and find blind players. They may not be aware that these games and systems exist that allow them to participate. So many blind people tend to lock themselves away because they don't think the world's accessible. But there are things out there for the blind to do, and search them out. Show them Dungeons and Dragons. It's amazing. It's freeing. I can't recommend that highly enough. And for blind people that may be listening to it, go try Dungeons and Dragons or any role-playing game. If you can, have friends to help you with it. It's a lot of fun. You get to be somebody that you're not, and you get to be silly with your friends and have fun. And I still talk with my friends today about stuff that happened 30 years ago in games, the way that as if it actually happened to it. We'll sit around, and the old guys sit around reminiscing about when, the giant flaming slug fell off the cliff onto the top of us.
Yeah.
It's a special thing. It's a special bond you get with the people you play with, and it's worth doing.
Yeah. Do you bring some of the old characters that you used back when you were teenagers to your new stories? Like,
sometimes I'll bring them in as NPCs and stuff.
Yeah.
And occasionally I'll recycle them, to use a character from way back bring them back to life in a new story.
Yeah, it's awesome. And yeah, for other blind players, there was a post on the blind subreddit, and they also created a Twitter account called Knights of the Braille. So Jim, the organizer's name is Jim. He's organizing online groups to play D&D with. I believe currently he's running 2 groups, and I think he will start a few more. So all the players are blind or visually impaired, as far as I know.
Yeah.
And he's also working on some accessibility tools, so you can pretty much play everything using your computer and screen reader. I think he will come on the show soon to talk about what he's been working on. And I'll post a link to that as well. So if you're someone who's blind out there listening and would like to try, but you don't have a local group, I also my friend group isn't into role-playing games, so I'm playing with an online group. And as I've said before, Roll20 is not very accessible, and Roll20 is a website that's mostly used for playing tabletop RPGs online. But I'll drop a link to Knights of Braille in the show notes as well, so you can get in touch.
One of the things I do on Twitter is find gaming groups for blind gamers. If you really want to play and you want to get into it, contact me on Twitter. Send me a direct message. I'm at Blind Temple on Twitter, and I'll find you a gaming group. I've had 100% success. I'll find you one. It may be a local one, it may be an online one, but I'll find you a gaming group if you really want to play.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was just about to ask you about how people can contact you. So you can contact Temple at Blind Temple on Twitter, and I will also have a link to his profile in the show notes for easier access. Temple, thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I really enjoyed this chat.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Ertay.
Yeah, thank you too. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this and any of our previous episodes, feel free to share it with your friend. Spreading the word really helps the show. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can find me on Twitter at SightlessFun, or you can send me an email, sightlessfun@outlook.com. Also, check out our website at www.sightless.fun. Thank you very much, and remember, you can still have fun while being sightless. This episode was hosted by Ertay and edited by Alpay Shashko. We'd also like to extend our special thanks to Fighting Windmills for allowing us to use their music in our podcast. You can find them at fightingwindmillsmk.bandcamp.com.